You! Woo! I came just as soon as I heard the news.
While you're enjoying that midnight snack, tune in to watch the best B movies on Cleveland Classic Cinema.
What began as a silly party given by an eccentric has now involved us all in murder.
I ain't right, I'm just scared.
With host Nick D'Amico.
It's always good to know that.
Only on TV 20. We are Cleveland.
Listen up, Cleveland. Listen up, Cleveland.
On today's episode of Listen Up Cleveland, we'll have no speeches, no tuxes, it's only rock and roll at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum's 11th annual spring benefit at Cleveland Public Auditorium, featuring 2014 inductees Hall and Oates. Then we'll talk with founder and CEO of Alternative Press magazine, Mike Shea, about the magazine's 29-year history and the first annual Alternative Press Awards.
Listen up, Cleveland.
For an in-depth look at local news and events happening in our great city, tune in to TV 20's Weekly News Wrap-Up, where you get the whole story. Daily at 7 a.m., noon, and 6 p.m. Only right here on TV 20. TV 20, we are Cleveland.
Listen up, Cleveland.
First up, the biggest Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum fundraiser of the year, it's only Rock and Roll Spring Benefit. Greg, out of all the events that the Rock Hall throws out the year, why is the Spring Benefit so vital?
Well, this is our biggest fundraiser of the year, and it raises dollars for our education programs. We bring 40,000 kids a year through the museum, and they learn things like math, science, the history of, they learn technology, they learn alliteration, reading skills, all through rock and roll. And those programs are free to kids in Cleveland Municipal Schools. We even pay for the buses to bring them here.
Now, what's something cool and fun and different about this event, unlike the other Rock Hall events, you think?
Well, this event, we call it no speeches, no tuxes, it's only rock and roll. We raise dollars for these good causes, but we also want to make sure that we just have a great time, listen to some great music. We have 2014 Hall of Fame inductees, Daryl Hall and John Oates, performing tonight, and we're going to have 5,000 people sitting upstairs cheering them on. It's going to be a great night.
Now, quickly, do you have a favorite Hall and Oates song of all time?
You know, I think everybody has different songs for different eras. And I have to say, growing up in the 70s and 80s, She's Gone was always a classic and just great blue-eyed soul. And I also grew up in the Philly area where they're from, so we listen to them all summer long. Just a great band.
Why is music education so important to you, Mayor?
Well, because with education, it really gives you an opportunity in life. It gives you ability to make choices. And without it, your world is kind of small and your choices and options are limited.
What do you think of the annual spring benefit that the Rock Hall puts on every year, and especially being right here at Public Auditorium?
Well, it's appropriate for this spot. You know, there were a lot of concerts here, and that's is what they do. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum, it's about rock and roll and those things that used to happen and still happen sometimes here. So it's a great event. A lot of people come, as you can see, and it's an appropriate venue for the event.
Chief, you're on the board for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum, especially with this event. What goes into making something as phenomenal as this?
Well, a lot of hard work and dedication. I am on the board, but there's a committee. It's the Induction and Gala Committee. This year it's chaired by Terry Weinberg. It's got great people on there. A lot of people roll up their sleeves and work very, very hard to put on this event. And this event is very important. As you know, we do it every 2 years, and then we do the induction ceremonies every 3 years. So, of course, we have inductions again next year. So this is like our teaser to the inductions for next year. And to have Hall and Oates this year, they were just inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, this year's class, and to have them turn around right away and say, absolutely, we're coming to Cleveland. And not only will we perform, they're the only main performer this evening, which is phenomenal. I mean, I think it's important that this is our Rock Hall. This museum is the only one like this in the world. It is internationally renowned. Everyone knows it. People travel from all over the world to come here to see our museum. And so if you're a Clevelander and you live here or you live in Ohio, you need to get up here and see your museum as well. We always change the exhibits. We got a great exhibit going on now about the history of festivals, which is really important as we hear about summer festivals each year. And so this is our asset. We fought to have this museum here in Cleveland. We beat out some other cities, and it's right here in our backyard. So I'm just asking you, make sure you come and visit it. If you haven't been down here, take a family day, come hang out at the museum. Director, what is it like to party like this in our home here at Public Hall?
This is the best part of the year in Cleveland, Ohio. I love it every time it comes. It's just a wonderful event.
What's your favorite part of this event every year? Because it's the 11th year this year.
Listen, and I should say this, but the food is great. The food is really great. And then they got Hall and Oates this year, right? I had Hall and Oates on the 8-track. You know what the 8-track is?
What's your favorite Hall and Oates song?
I want to say right now, but I'll tell you this. I had it on 8-track.
What made you decide to come out tonight for the Rock and Roll Spring Benefit?
Well, I mean, Hall and Oates is a just classic group. I know a lot of people my age necessarily aren't really hip, but they're just, I don't know, they're one of the best duos ever. Just soulful music. I don't think a lot of that's created these days, so they don't tour a lot, and for them to be in town, I'm there.
And the recent inductees as well.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, a classic group, one of the best duos ever. And, I mean, how can you not? If people really take the time to listen to all their hits that they don't realize are Hall and Oates hits, they'd realize that they have a lot of good music.
Why is it important to you to support the museum?
Well, I mean, the Rock Hall, I mean, there's only one, you know, and it encompasses, you know, really all types of music. Music lovers from all over the world come to it, want to come to it. So the fact that it's in Cleveland, it's kind of good to support it and be there. And it's always a fun time there also.
You guys are always such huge supporters of the Rock Hall, but why do you love coming to events like this in particular?
Well, this is Cleveland. Right here, I mean, you can't get much more Cleveland than this. It's in beautiful Cleveland Auditorium, and I think that's the correct way to say it.
Cleveland Public Auditorium.
Public, I forgot the public. But honestly, you can't beat a space like this. I mean, between the architecture, just the space, the environment, everything like that, so much history goes into this building. And while Cleveland's on the growth and building so much new, we can never forget about our past. And being able to have an event like this in such a historical place is just mind-blowing. And honestly, it gives you chills being here and being able to see everything and kind of just all the space that this is and the architecture, and it's going to be an exciting night.
Now, Hall & Oates obviously is performing tonight. Do you guys have a favorite Hall & Oates song?
We were actually discussing this on the way here.
We've been arguing over and over, and until she hears me sing one of them, she can't come up with a favorite one.
When we return to Listen Up Cleveland, we'll talk to Mike Shea, founder of Alternative Press Magazine, about its history here in Cleveland. Stay tuned.
You know, a lot of people that are not in the music industry don't understand.
So songwriting's my job. That's what I get up and do every day.
You know, songwriters, that's how they make their living day to day.
I don't have a 9 to 5, I just write.
I think music is probably one of the most beautiful things that brings people together.
How many times has a song got you to one place to the other?
Be responsible when you download.
Join me and take the pledge at SaveTheMusicAmerica.org.
Don't illegally download.
You're watching TV 20. We are Cleveland.
Listen up, Cleveland.
Alternative Press magazine is an internationally renowned music magazine, but what some people don't realize is that, like the term rock and roll, its home is right here in Cleveland. Originally starting in 1985 out of the home of founder and CEO Mike Shea, it's now celebrating 29 years and just held its first annual Alternative Press Magazine Award show at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum. We sat down with Mike to find out about the history of the magazine and Cleveland's music scene.
We were just a bunch of kids, punk kids, that we were all divided up into sub-scenes. So you had the metal kids, the skater kids, the new wave kids, the old school punks, the new school punks, and all these other stuff. And there was no way for any of us to talk to each other and find out what's going on with bands in town, or bands in general around the country. And we couldn't tell who was coming to town. We didn't understand. We didn't know if a new 7-inch was coming out from somebody. We would hear about a new band, but we didn't know much about them. So, and the local media at the time were very much Michael Stanley and Journey and Springsteen and Kid Leo. And so I started a fanzine to kind of bring all these subgenres together underneath one house. This is a copy of the first issue, a replicate. And so it was basically done like a high school newspaper at the time. So I knew how to do a high school newspaper, so we sold ads. But you know, you can come down here to the staff box. You can see down here, like, hardcore reviewer was Scum. That was his name. And you know, our fashion here was Toysia and Jana, whatever, and that wasn't even their names, obviously. But like, this was just the kind of stuff we did. So we did this fanzine, and we handed it out at a punk show down in the Flats. It's funny, the communists at the Revolution Books down in Coventry, I don't even know if they're still there anymore. They embraced us big time. They thought we were communists. We weren't. We were just taking their ad money. So we handed it out at a punk rock show on the Flats on June 6, 1985. I was homesick. I didn't even do it. And my friend Dave went down to the show and handed it out at night. And it was on the corner of Columbus Road. The building's still there. The punks would go down there and hang out. And then there used to be a crematory next door, and they used to break in there, and they would steal the hearse, and they'd drive it up and down the streets and have a coffin in it. It was just typical. So anyway, my point is that we handed out 1,000 copies in one night. They were gone. And then like a week later, all of a sudden we started hearing kids from, we didn't hear them back then, they wrote us handwritten notes from Columbus and Detroit and Pittsburgh saying, hey, we really like your zine. Can I write about the Pittsburgh scene? Can I write about the Columbus scene? And we're like, yeah, let's do it. And it's kind of came to, like, everybody's volunteering. So you just had a bunch of like 18, 19, 20-year-old kids writing about their favorite music for the zine, and it just kept growing from there. We didn't know what we were doing. We weren't business people. We were just kids, and we started running out of money fast, and so we started throwing punk rock shows at the Variety Theater here in Cleveland over 119th and Lorraine, and it's an old vaudeville house, and it's notorious for the fact that Motorhead played in there one night, and it was so loud that the ceiling was coming down, the plaster was cracking, coming down on the audience. So we used to throw these concerts in there, and we would have like 7, 8, 9 bands for $5, and we made enough money off that to finance this fanzine some more. But then the other promoters in town kind of got sick of us, and they would cross-promote against us. So they would book shows either on the same day or right before that would take part of our audience away. And so we lost our base of kids, and so we stopped doing shows, and then we ran out of money, and then we went away for about a year. And I worked at North Randall for that time period, and when people still went there. And I had one of my guys, he used to be a record reviewer for us, and he called me up one night, and he's like, hey, how much would it be to do a reunion issue? Because I really, really like doing it. And he said it was so much fun. And he's like, just one, and I just kind of penciled it out. And I went about $800. And he went, how about if I front it? And I'm like, okay, all right, let's do it. So I called up a bunch of the record companies in New York City that used to send us free records and to write about. And I said, hey, we're going to come back and do a reunion issue. And they go, what? And I'm like, yeah, I'm just doing what? And they're like, wait a minute, wait, you guys are hot. You know that? Like, I'll buy 5 ads in one issue. And I'm like, what? Wait a minute, what are you talking about? And back then, since there was no internet, no nothing, the zine had been distributed nationally, like through Tower Records, Rest in Peace, and a bunch of other distributors like that. And then over that year time, the zine was picked up by kids in Florida, California, and everywhere, Seattle, and they started to fall in love with it. And then they would find other issues that were back issues laying in the store, and they'd buy those. And so we had this like groundswell of support and readership, even though we weren't around. And so all of a sudden we came back, and these labels were like, we want to support you because everybody's talking about you guys. And we're like, okay. So we made more money off that one issue than we had in the 9 prior to that. So 8 prior to that. So we came back, and then it's just been kind of like consistent ever since 1988.
This year was the first annual Alternative Press Magazine Award Show, held appropriately at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum. Almost 30 years into publication, I found out why Mike decided to finally create the award show.
We started it now because of the fact that it was overdue. Our scene really needed it. Our Billboard recently kind of said it best. Our community is kind of dismissed and belittled and underrepresented and everything by the mainstream music community, the mainstream entertainment industry, the mainstream media industry. They kind of see this whole community as for teenage girls, Hot Topic, goth, and emo. And they don't understand that a lot of these bands in this community make more money in merch sales than a lot of the bands on Lollapalooza. And it's because the fan dedication is much more dedicated, is much stronger. And these aren't Justin Bieber bands, and I think that's the other things too. Is they're kind of looked at like as Disney acts, and they're not. These are bands that they're underground acts, they're punk bands, they're metal bands, they're amalgamations of all of that. They've got really hard rock music. They can swear, they can be sweet, they can be cuddly, it can be everything. And but we're just kind of by and large pushed to the side, and so it was kind of like, well, if you're not going to let us sit at your lunch table, then we're just going to have a party at our lunch table. And so that's what we did. We created our own party at our lunch table. And we don't really, as a community, and we're a big community, we don't really get a chance to see each other very often, unless for portions of things, maybe for 5 minutes at South by Southwest, maybe for 1 or 2 Warped Tour dates, some of us see each other. But by and large, we don't have anything where we can all kind of come together. And so when we did this, it was a family reunion, and it became something where we could all kind of just come together and put all the work to the side and sit down and talk. And we did that on 2 levels. We did it on the industry level, because you had managers that are usually beating each other up, sit down and have pizza together. And then you have the bands who, a lot of them do tour with each other, but you know, sometimes you'll tour with somebody in 2012 and then not see them again in 2015, and because your band gets bigger or your band doesn't get as popular anymore, and so you don't hang out with that band anymore. And so it was really nice to kind of see all these musicians kind of come together as a family unit, and they were just so happy because it was like seeing lost brothers and stuff. So,
what did it mean to you to have Slash and Joan Jett and Billy Corgan all at your lunch table, all a part of your family reunion? Because these are huge acts and they were honored as well. Yeah, those guys coming to the table was kind of like having, I don't know if you remember in shop class, there was always the cool ones in shop class, and you couldn't talk because it was too cool, and they always smoked in school, and nobody messed with them. And it was like having them come to your table and say, all right, you're cool. And it was weird watching Joan Jett and Slash beautifully annihilate that Stones song. And it was weird. It's like Joan Jett is part of our community. Slash is part of our community in many ways. I mean, he was on the cover of our 10th issue. So we've covered Joan Jett plenty of times in the past. It's great because they all kind of came out of our world. And when Guns N' Roses started out, they were not mainstream rock.
they were considered kind of revolutionary rock at the time, and a lot of mainstream people at the time, that was like towards the end of the hair metal days, did not like them. They thought they were like, what's this trashy rock stuff? And they were in many ways kind of like a Nirvana of rock and roll at that point. And so they were embraced by our community, the underground community first, before they blew up into the mainstream community. So it was really nice to kind of have them all back together again, and surreal, absolutely surreal. It was more surreal to see Joe Perry up there than anything. Like Aerosmith, like really. And he loved it. He was sitting on side stage watching most of the show. He loved it. He loved the music. He thought it was so cool. I was like, yeah, that's awesome.
Alternative press has always been on the cutting edge of showcasing up-and-coming artists. I had Mike share what bands we should be listening to right now.
Well, if you want to stay on top of things and feel somewhat relevant to your kid, I would say some of the bands that are really big right now, you start with some of the basics. You start with All Time Low, you start with Sleeping with Sirens, you start with, then you go into Crown the Empire, you go into Issues. You're a little bit harder rock stuff, maybe Chiodos you may like, Mice and Men, Bring Me the Horizon. Day to Remember is a little bit more pop punk rock. I'd say Paramore, obviously, and Fall Out Boy, of course, but those are more mainstream now. And I'd start there. I think that's enough right off the bat to kind of give you the basics. And all of them were part of our show, and it was so awesome to see them on a first year when nobody knew what the hell was going to happen, just commit immediately out of the box.
If you're a musician and wondered how you can get AP to notice you, they have a way local artists can submit to the magazine.
We kind of have two levels of artist A&R that we do. Part of it is done internally where bands can come to our website and submit to our AP&R link, and they can upload an MP3 and we can hear their stuff, or they can send us links to where their music's housed. And that's a nice way. That's how things have changed now, instead of the old school way where people used to send cassette tapes into us. And the other one is we have street teamers and correspondents all over the country who are constantly seeing music locally there, and there are kind of eyes and ears down there, and they'll tell us like this band's getting hot and this one's good and so forth.
I asked Mike about the challenges the magazine faces, especially with technology ever changing, and how it feels to have a successful business right here in Cleveland.
The thing is that we never had a business plan. And we, even when we had lines of credit and stuff, we kind of faked it. And, you know, you have to understand, when we came out with that little zine, we didn't know where it was going to go. We were just bored. And then even after that, and then we became incorporated in 1991, and then we had a board, and then we had, like, you do all these official things, but they don't even mean anything. In the long run, when you're struggling and you're trying to pay your bills and you're trying to grow and you're trying to get some band to talk to and so forth. And so we've never really known where we were going to be in 3 years, because we were always a small independent company that wasn't never really financed well. And so we always just tried to like adapt. And so we kind of feel like we're always just on a very we're like on the Colorado River. That's how we are. And we know that there's water in front of us, and we know there's going to be some silent moments, some really calm, peaceful moments that are going to be awesome, and there's going to be some rapids that are going to beat the crap out of us. And so we just try and prepare ourselves for that. But I don't think our goal has really ever been to like, well, why don't we figure out the end of the river? Like, we don't, because I think you kind of put some finality on it, or you put some expectation on it, and I'd rather just keep going down the river. Trent Reznor used to say, if you want to become famous in Cleveland, you got to become famous outside of Cleveland first. And I think that's the same anywhere, to tell you the truth. But I think we've always been kind of like a nice little secret about this town. This town it is a rock and roll town, but it's a specific rock and roll town. And we're known for hip hop, some really great hip hop acts and R&B acts. And we have a couple metal bands out of here that are good, and we have some very old school classic bands that are kind of out of here, or portions of classic bands. But we're not really known for what we're doing, even though we actually are. I mean, there's some major punk bands that came out of Cleveland that, with the American punk history, between Perubu and Devo and the Dead Boys and so forth. But we've really, not a lot of people know we're here still. So by doing it here, I know that we've found out that there is a whole community here of mainly a lot of young entrepreneurs and progressive like development people in this town that are like the new generation that know who we are and they embrace us and they're so happy for us. But I kind of feel like the generation above that and the one that's been around here for a while don't get it. And I think that that's really the transformation for Cleveland, and that's really probably the next bit of relationship bridge building that has to be done in this town, because you're seeing the town is changing, developing, growing, and becoming amazing. But in order to kind of get that to really happen on a full scale and to get it out there to the world, you need to have both sides of the town development talking and embracing and helping each other. And right now I don't think that's always the case.
After almost 30 years in the business, Mike has met thousands of musicians, so I had to ask, who should be inducted in the Rock Hall?
I'd like to see The Cure, actually. I think The Cure should go in. I think Robert Smith would actually accept it. But yeah, I think The Cure should go in. That would be awesome. I'm sure I'm forgetting some major people, but if you're talking from like our world, who's kind of iconic in that respect, yeah, I'd say let's start there. There's a whole litany of people after that, but yeah, I mean, they're getting Nirvana at least, so that's cool.
Why don't give a damn on my bad reputation? World's in trouble, there's no communication. Everyone can say what you want to say, nothing gets better anyway. And I don't give a damn on my bad reputation. And the way I know, not me. Oh no, not me, not me, not me. Thank you very much to Billy Crooked. The vacancies from Cleveland, Ohio.